Hello tankers and tankettes, welcome to a pair of view replays, and I have picked out a late lamented tank. Well, maybe not so much lamented, but it's the Aufkl.Panther, the Scout Panther, aka the Awful Panther. But having said that, I think it was in the game long enough that it picked up a few fans, and we've got a pretty decent pair of replays to show you. Now, it's a pretty silly looking machine, and if you don't know, 9.9 replaced this with the Panzer 1C, and it's a little bit different because this had the Panther hull but a much lighter turret. It was very good at ramming lighter vehicles because it doesn't have didn't have a great top speed for a scout anyway, but it did have a very good power to weight ratio, and for anything lighter than it, well, much like the very rarely seen Panzer 5.4, this thing is pretty good at smushing up lighter vehicles, and that means it's very good at smushing up other scouts if you can get the chance to ram into them. This particular match is a tier 3 game. This is Department of Lucas, and it's a pretty decent matchup. In fact, both of these games are going to be tier 8 battles, so the matchmaking's pretty good for a tier 7 scout. I think one of them's 9.5 and the other's 9.6, and I can't remember which one's which. It doesn't matter which way around it is, it's just both these replays are going to be a bit derpy in places as a result. So he's moved up to this area of Redshire, this kind of middle saddle ridge, I don't know what you want to call that, but it's not a bad place to poke around as a scout. There is, of course, the other position over in sort of F9-ish, which is, if you're in a fast enough scout, if you can get there in time, it's a pretty good position to spot all the stuff that is pushing from the north from the other side. But this thing, like I said, although the power to weight ratio is pretty decent for a scout, well, compared to some of the other tier 7s anyway. I mean, it definitely beat the 1375 in that regard, but the 1375 was bottom of the pack by quite a margin in quite a lot of ways. But he decided to go here instead, and I'm going to say actually there is a fair bit of luck involved with this particular replay. It's one of those things, and I might talk a little about RNG in this particular replay as well, but for now, he's concentrating more on putting his gun to use than he is in scouting. And this has got a good gun, or it had a good gun. I keep using the present tense, so I'm going to have to get used to that. Was it a 75mm, is it a squeeze bore? I can't remember, but it's the same gun that you can mount on the tier 6 VK, which is basically a Tiger prototype. And it's a pretty decent gun on a scout. It's more than enough for side and rear armour of a fair few tanks. For other tanks, well, the APCR ammo is pretty decent on this as well. Was pretty decent. These tenses, man, it's like, okay, this is this dearly departed tank, you know, it's all too soon, man, it's all too soon. But the point is, it's a decent gun for a scout tank, and as you can see, the rate of fire is pretty good. And so if you can get the chance to use it for damage, well, it can do that. And that's actually, that seems to be what the new German Scout is more about, because it's got a 90mm gun. And the reload's not particularly great, but it's still a 90mm gun on a Scout, so that's not too shabby. Now, this KV-85, well, this is a tier 6 tank. That's something you can easily pen. But the guy completely donked his shot into the ground, so he's managed to get away with taking no damage so far. He's decided to be a bit more proactive at this point, pushing round up the flank. However, this Rheinmetall's just taken an unhealthy interest, but very luckily for him, that shot went into his tracks. Now, this is one of the moments where I'm going to mention RNG, because I talked about it a whole bunch in that This Is Not the Hype Train video that I did. And I was saying that, well, basically, it's one of the things where I can understand why they don't want to change it, because it kind of, that random element, and some games are entirely built around RNG. I mean, look at stuff like FTL, for instance, but that random element basically kind of levels the playing field for less good players. But conversely, it punishes better players, because there's always that random element that you can't account for. So it's kind of like it's meant as a balancing measure, and as this is an online multiplayer game, I can see why it's there. But things like that Rhymatool shot into the tracks, like, yeah, that wasn't really anything to do with skill, him dodging that. That was pure luck. So the luck can go in your direction, you know, it goes both ways. It's not just that sometimes you get unlucky, sometimes you get lucky with, like with that shot as well. But it doesn't really have anything to do with rewarding skill. It is, as that shot was, just pure luck. So he's noticed the Type 59 is tangling with AT-15A, and he does make a bit of a mistake here, and you're going to see exactly what I mean in a second. Now, side and rear of the AT-15A, well, the side armour for this gun, a bit on the tough side, but the rear armour he can definitely do something with. Now, he could try and track this guy, but bear in mind, this gun doesn't get HE shells, and it's the same with the Tier 6 VK as well. Now, he maybe doesn't know which weak spots to go for exactly, but he does kind of get a handle on it. But he's just sat out in the open. And if you're going to do what he was doing and not close the distance and try and hug the rear armour of a tank in that situation, or a tank destroyer in that situation, then the very least he could have done, and what he probably should have done, is at least get close to that house. So if the AT-15A did, as he was going to, you know, that guy's reactions were totally off as well. He was kind of turning around and like, oh, there's a tank I can shoot at. I'm not going to get that Type 59. Might as well get a shot in there as well. Didn't get a chance, but it was just sheer luck that Department of Lucas didn't take any more damage there. But if he'd been close to the house, he could have ducked into hard cover when he saw that guy was turning for him, at which point, well, maybe he would have been able to do a little bit less damage. The Type 59 would have gotten the kill, but that's fine. You know, this is a team game at the end of the day. The chances, the scenarios where you're going to be doing all the carrying yourself are comparatively few and far between, because you need exactly the right sorts of combinations of circumstances to happen. So we've come down to 10-12, but one of the remaining enemy tanks is an IS-6 who is on pretty high health. And that's going to be a problem, as we'll see. Our IS-6, and again, that was a bit lucky. That was not particularly the best driving going into that house, but anyway, he got away with it. But the rest of our team are not particularly high health. I mean, T-34-3 is an easy one-shot. The Type 59 ain't doing so well, and we just lost the IS-6 who had a smidgen of health. So, no idea what the Nashorn is. He seems to be tied up on the one line with the Chiri and the SU-152. They're there somewhere as well. But over on this side, it really is only Department of Lucas that has any amount of health left. And he might have actually done well to try and close the distance, but he's just trying to work the side armor. And you'll see, against a gun like this, how troll IS-6 side armor can be. And he is getting some pens, but that's the first one he's managed. He's not going to be the only one he manages, but this is a case where, against a target like that, you probably would want to reach for the A.P. CR. Anyway, he gets moving. His best bet is getting behind the guy and getting his rear armor. But a new problem has occurred, a fresh problem, in that the Chiri is now pelting them with shots from behind. So they really have to try and clean up this IS-6 as quick as possible. So unfortunately the T-34-3 even dies. But between all three of them, they managed to take that IS-6 down. Department of Lucas's contribution there was kind of minimal. Like, he did 244 damage. He could have potentially taken a hit, and maybe the T-43 would still be alive. Sometimes in that kind of situation, when you're in a scout tank, even if it's not the fastest, nippiest scout tank, you can still use the hit points that you've got. You can try and distract somebody while your allies work them over. So it's I don't know, again, could be a misplay, but that one's a little more arguable. However, and we're down to the last enemy tank here. I mean, there's a chance this guy could derp one or the other of them, but it's a tank destroyer, so as long as one of them can get round behind him and not screw it up, it should be fine. But and there we go, there's a ram. Just the fact that he has been able to chip away at a bit of damage here and a bit of damage there, he's done over 2,000 damage, and that's not bad when you consider the nature of this gun. So that's what I was kind of getting towards when I was saying that this, it's not really a classic scout. It can work as a passive scout, but it has a pretty good gun for a scout, or had a pretty good gun. And so you could get results like that, where he's actually, what, 3rd place for damage on the team, just 6 kills, nearly 1300 base XP. So although he had a couple of moments of derp, his luck held, crucially, and sometimes luck is a factor in this game. As I've said, you know, the RNG can help you as well as hurt you. But he made enough of his shots connect that he was able to do a decent chunk of damage and walk away with, well, technically the only person left alive, but only because that Type 59 got derped just a fraction before he was able to get that final killing shot on the SU-152. So the next game that is that I've picked out is a little bit different. It's a little bit. I don't want to make out like Lucas totally lucked out through the whole battle. You know, he was paying attention and moving around the map fairly well. It's just there were a couple of moments that were a bit derpy. But well, you've seen my replays, you know what I'm like. But this next one I think is going to be a bit more coordinated, and you'll get to see what this gun really can do, or well, I should say, could do. Next up we have Kiri the Darkblade, and again, as I said, tier 8 matchmaking, so pretty good. This time it's an assault battle and he's on the defending side. Now you don't see a lot of these replays getting shown, at least not on my channel, and I don't get sent a lot of them because I suspect not a lot of people play this particular game mode as a percentage of the player base. Certainly not at the higher tiers, because I think once you get past your first, I think it's tier 6, you are entirely free to turn off this game mode and the encounter game mode as well. One of the notable features about this is the battles are shorter. It's 10 minutes, and I'm not actually sure. I think I've gotten into trouble previously saying it's impossible to have a draw. Actually, maybe it is possible to have a draw. I'm not sure. But it basically forces the attacking team to, like, they can't just camp. I mean, it has that going for it. The attacking team actually has to do something, because if they don't, the defending team can just sit on their asses for 10 minutes and they've won. And the reason I don't particularly like this game mode is more to do with they kind of bodged it into a bunch of existing maps, and some of them were okay to play. There were actually some maps, I think Siegfried Line stands out in particular, where I actually quite enjoy the assault game mode, but there are other maps where I completely loathe it, and you can't pick and choose, so I just turned it off entirely. So he's already been able to get a little bit of damage out of that T-150, who was rather incautiously pressing around. There's an enemy scout down there, a M41 Bulldog, and he really probably doesn't want to get into close quarters combat with that thing, especially not if it's got the autoloader, because the M41 Bulldog, I think it's fair to say, outclasses this in a lot of ways. Although if you get the chance to ram an M41 Bulldog with an Aufkl.Panther, it probably would be quite hilarious, or it would have been hilarious. There we go with those tenses again. Oh man, it was like this when they, I don't know if you look back in the archives, there's actually I did a sort of similar video not that long after they, or maybe not that long before, I can't remember, they removed the T50-2. And I'd saved a pair of replays and picked them out and did a little, well, not a eulogy really, but I gave it a fond farewell. And it was kind of weird because, yeah, it was a tank I'd played a lot. But this is a tank I never played, I have to say. I mean, I've gotten as far as tier 6 on the German scout line, and it's taken me long enough to get up there that they've put in a whole new tier 7. So there you go. But it's almost a pity I never got to play this, because it's such a distinctive machine, and I don't know, maybe I would have enjoyed it. You never know, stranger things have happened. He spotted this lone lurver, and although he's just helped demolish a friendly Walker Bulldog, although it was artillery that got the killing blow, and he's going to have to be a little bit careful if there's artillery around. But between him and these other tanks, well, they're just working over this guy pretty good. It's primarily him and the ELC that are doing the work here. Because as we've seen, yes, actually there are some tank destroyers down there as well. But although they are in a position to help out this lurver if Kiri or the ELC or whoever get within their line of fire, they seem unwilling to actually come out to support the guy, so they're playing in a fairly passive way. And oh, that drive-by, that nearly went wrong. And look at this, they're just absolutely, like, this is a heavy tank driver's, not even a heavy tank driver's worst case scenario, this is like a TD player's worst case scenario, and yeah, that lurver was really not doing so well. Didn't land a single point of damage apart from when Kiri actually scraped against his side, lost about 80 hit points doing that. But he did eventually take a hit, and it was from the SU because he'd backed out a little bit too far, basically. But looking at the map, it looks like the main thrust of the enemy forces have looped round from the south. They've come round from the J and K lines. So it looks like just a couple of tank destroyers back there. And yes, they could push into them, excuse me, but it would probably be quite costly to do so in terms of hit points. And yeah, you could get round behind the enemy tanks, but you could also do what Kiri is doing and get round behind the enemy tanks this way. And at that point, you've got flanking shots for days. And he's almost done 2,000 damage already. Over 1,000 of it from that unwary lurver. But he hasn't actually picked up a kill yet. Although, he's about to. There we go. KV3, side of the turret, no problem. It does seem to be a WZ-111 on the friendly team that is doing a lot of the defensive work up there. And the enemy team do still have arty, so he's managed to get himself into a fairly good position. But we have lost most of our own tier 8s already. In fact, it's just the WZ and artillery left at this point of the top tiers. The rest of them, I don't know if they acquitted themselves very well. We actually started off with the battle even with that WZ. I don't know if you caught it in the chat, but saying, you know, everyone report the Carnarvon for being a bot. And I have no idea why. The battle hadn't even started yet, but I would guess the WZ is an XVM user and the Carnarvon had pretty bad stats. And so therefore he jumped to a massive conclusion. It might have been an accurate conclusion, or it might have been just that the Carnarvon player was very bad. And either way, I just, even if I had XVM installed, like the stats would have to be pretty extremely awful before I would jump to that kind of a conclusion. So of the tanks that are pressuring the cap, the lurver is really the only one that's a major threat. I mean, we're at 9-8. The AT-15 actually, he could be a problem as well if he gets a chance to use his rate of fire. And at that range, Kiri's gun is not going to be effective against that side armor. In fact, even at a closer range, where you saw in the previous battle with Department of Lucas, from a much closer distance trying to pen the side with A.P. of an AT-15A, but I think it's the same side armor, and just having no success whatsoever. Meanwhile, artillery sitting there, and look at those reaction times. Huh, I'm losing hit points. I wonder why I'm losing hit points. Huh, maybe I should move. You can just see the cogs turning. The enemy team are getting perilously close to a cap, but that's a very nicely timed shot. That actually just puts him over 3,100 damage, and the Tiger gets lit up at the same time. So I'm pretty sure he just earned himself a Defender badge with not only killing that Hellcat, resetting his points, but then resetting this Tiger as well. And I guess that was the enemy team's plan, was to try and just cap this out. And you can either cap or you can try and wipe out the enemy team. And I always feel like the attacking team, well, it depends on the map. I mean, I think they've done a lot more balance work since I last properly played this game mode. But there were some maps where it heavily favoured either an attacking side or a defending side. And on this map, I think it's actually a little bit more even, although player skill still counts for a lot, you know, who's doing what. But meanwhile, I mean, the WZ has, I think, acquitted himself fairly well. But look at the damage count that Kiri has managed to accumulate. Like, 3,600, nearly 3,700 damage, and this gun does, what, 135 average? So he has been, I mean, he's probably been doing a bit of scouting work and getting a bit of spotting, because as you can see, he not only has binoculars, but he's got camo net as well. So he clearly does use this for passive spotting, because that's a classic passive spotting setup. Like, he's probably got, I don't know, at a guess, ventilation or a gun rammer or something like that in the third slot. But if you're going to use a tank like this for pure damage, then you would maybe forego one of those and put in, I don't know, like gun lane drive, gun rammer and vents or something like that. Although on this machine, at least one of those would be a waste of space. But it's just kind of worked out that he's actually been able to do a lot of flanking fire. And it was pretty tasty getting all that damage against the Lurver, but it's not just been the Lurver. He's been chipping away at the health of a lot of different tanks. And he's going to need to get a move on if he's going to have any chance of getting a last bit of damage on this tank. Not only because there are two tanks that are much closer, although he's easily gaining ground on this Tiger 1, but time is running out. We're down to 45 seconds now. And even if they don't kill the Su-101, well, they've won by default, basically, because they held the cap. But he's actually, and you can see here the power to weight ratio of this thing was alright. It was certainly decent enough for going up hills and maintaining a decent enough speed. You know, for a medium tank, this would be really good. It's not a medium tank, though, it's a scout tank. But whatever, he's gotten here just ahead of the Tiger. He actually just auto-aims and plows right in. And he too is going to go for a, well, it looked like he was going to go for a boop, but he actually doesn't. But the circumstances were not particularly favourable. Anyway, he gets the kill, but not before the M6 pops out from behind the rock and whacks one into his rear armour, which must have been so nice. Anyway, doesn't matter. Ace tanker, defender, confederate, and a high caliber. That was over 4,000 damage, and his hit percentage was a lot better than Department of Lucas. Department of Lucas actually fired probably nearly as many shots, but a lot more of his either just missed entirely or bounced. Whereas Kiri the Darkblade, he had a lot less pressure. I mean, he was able to sit at more of a distance and use that very nice gun and just keep pecking away and pecking away for the most part. Obviously, the Lurver engagement was a lot more close range. In fact, that was, you know, his commander probably could have leaned out the hatch and stabbed the other guy's commander at that range. And then, of course, rushing in at the end to get that last bit of damage. But the whole chunk in between was pretty much just sitting on that, under that hill area and just using his team spotting. And that's kind of like the inverse of the ideal for a scout. But even in a scout, if you do the damage, you're still helping the team. Although sometimes it's more useful to actually get out there and scout rather than sit and do damage. But weakening the enemy team is never really a bad thing. So there we go. The Aufkl.Panther is another nickname it had. Yeah, I don't know why they took it out. I think they just found the SP1C and maybe decided it would be a more even a more historical fit for that role, because they have been on a bit of a kick for a while of trying to get rid of the more made-up vehicles where they can. Obviously, we still have things like the T28 Prot in the game, but in this case, although I'm sure it has its fans and had its fans who will mourn and lament its removal from the game, the SP1C doesn't look too bad. I mean, we'll see how that works out. I've already been sent one or two replays for that already, and you'll probably see a video or maybe a double feature like this in the not too distant future of that as well. So we'll see how that stacks up also. So if in the meantime you enjoyed this look back at a scout that was, you can hit the like button, you can leave any comments below, you can subscribe to my channel, and as always, stay tuned for more.